Donna Bailey really disliked insects. In fact, she hated them, especially spiders. But she turned that hate into something positive. She made a revolutionary game out of it. In 1978, Donna Bailey was working for General Motors as a programmer. At the time, she wasn't even familiar with most video games, as a friend mentioned that a song she liked actually referenced a very popular game at the time, Space Invader by the Pretenders. Playing an arcade machine was a whole new experience for her though. Figuring out the controls and the object of the game didn't come natural. She did, however, recognize its future potential immediately and decided then and there she wanted to program games. As one of the first female programmers at the time, she ended up at Atari, and for her first project she scored a hat trick. Arcades seemed to be more focused on a male demographic, even though Space Invaders started to break that trend. But it wasn't until Pac-Man and Centipede that there would be more of a mixed crowd. Girls liked Pac-Man because he was cute and they could empathize with a hate for insects. It wasn't just the insects at the core of the game Centipede, but it was the way it controlled as well. The original was controlled with a trackball. The trackball was in a sense the precursor of the computer mouse and allowed for more precision in controls. It would allow you to move in 4 directions. Next to the trackball was an action button to fire projectiles.
I've always loved balls, and to see big shiny silver balls running round the playground like this, I can get a certain amount of satisfaction.
For those unfamiliar, Centipede is a shooter. You are one of those little garden gnomes. Not really apparent when you look at the game, but apparently you are. A large centipede consisting of body parts that can move independently from each other crawls down the screen. The object is to keep the centipede and the incoming spiders out of the garden. Each part of the centipede you destroy will turn into a mushroom. Mushrooms block the centipede's way, causing them to turn back and move on to the next row, getting closer to you. When the centipede is at the bottom row, it slowly starts moving up again. When this happens, you have to make sure you dodge the centipede by moving up. This 4-way direction mechanic makes the game challenging, fun and sometimes a bit frantic. Like you see, the mushrooms occupy various positions on the screen, and the idea is to also not let them too close to the bottom row. The more space you have to fire, the more of the centipede you will hit, and the more pieces of it will change into mushrooms further away from you rather than near to you. An important mechanic is that when you shoot mushrooms, you get a short firing boost. After a while, fleas start dropping down, leaving mushrooms in place. If you manage to strike a few before they hit the ground, the centipede will slow down and making it easier to hit. My favorite port of Centipede is the one I played first, and I have been playing it a lot since. Centipede for the Atari 2600 is one of the best pick up and play games for the system. I played it so much that the name Centipede or the fact that I was battling a centipede didn't even matter at all. The 2600 depicted you and the centipede as mere dots or blocks. While I still think Adventure for the 2600 could have used some form of sprite distinction, it never bothered me in Centipede at all. I mention this because when I got onto other ports and eventually played the original arcade game, I had to get used to the fact that the game was about insects. Centipede had some wicked commercials on TV in the 1980s and became a pop culture hit because it brought men and women closer together in the arcade. In 1983, in the Netherlands, the Atari Championships were held, with Centipede as the final game, and it had a big turnout.
Het bleek dat de uiterst vermoeide Peter in het groen een puntentotaal had bereikt van maar liefst 253.550, waarmee hij in zijn categorie de Nederlandse kampioen werd.
Centipede also had a three-dimensional cameo in the movie Pixels, with a very cool scene that couldn't save an otherwise mediocre Adam Sandler comedy. Centipede on the go. A lot of arcade classics had ports for Game Boy, Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance in the 90s and early 2000s. This is one of the best Centipede ports on a technical level and it's very fun to play. It may be a bit easier than the arcade or 2600 version, but it controls better than the Sega Genesis controller on the 2600 or the 2600 controller itself. Trackball controllers are harder to come by these days, but once I have one, it will definitely make an appearance on the show. But there's so much more to the Centipede legacy and Keith Moon knows all about it.
Big shiny silver balls.
Centipede has a board game that was introduced in the 1980s following the Dungeons and Dragons hype. There were more video games back then that got this D&D treatment, but this is certainly a looker. Because video games were still only in the second generation and relatively new, board games were popular and a common way to spend your time. More imagination was needed because everything wasn't handed to you on a platter like entertainment these days. When you played board games, played at an arcade or on your home console, you were likely doing it with someone else. There are few games that bring the arcade experience to your home like Centipede. It doesn't matter which port or version you play. Donna Bailey was a pioneer for sure, and after 34 years of video games in my own life, Centipede is one that stood the test of time. It may be back even stronger than ever in Atari's new Recharged series. There's no end to Centipede. Will I see you on the scoreboards? Thank you guys for watching and stay shiny.